Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that the captives will be released and the prisoners will be freed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God. Okay, today is December 19th, Tuesday. I did an interview with Andy Schectman, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, and it went crazy. The response was truly epic. There's so many people that just truly loved. First off, they love you, Andy, and they thought it was a truly blessing for the two of us to talk together. What they call the secular world versus the biblical.
I agree,
prophetic.
though, Bo. I agree. It was a mind-expanding interview, and I really enjoyed it. I got more out of it than just about any I've done in recent memories. So it was wonderful to come back.
Thank you. No, and it's a pleasure having you, because we did a little pre-talk here. And like I say, I do my podcast. My path that I travel is I analyze patterns. I study time, and so I don't have the time that's my path, right? Whereas your path is you're in the fully in the secular world, financial world. You watch all the news, what's going on all the time. And so it's fun to put the two together. And, and it was just enjoyable, because when I met you, I really liked you. I just thought we had like a good connection, and you honestly seem like a truly honest person. And I respect that. That's right. I just, to me, honesty and integrity is critical. And you show that, so I love that about you. And so it was kind of fun, because then you're like, well, then we talked about cycles, and you're like, because I really, I personally believe you started to get truly intrigued after that interview. So I actually sent you some of my cycle work, and it's you can kind of talk a little bit what you experienced, but the point I want to illustrate was the cycles themselves, and you can confirm this. The cycles were confirming that last week we were supposed to see a cycle turn up. And it was just supposed to blow vertical, take off vertical, after they've been taking it down for like a week and a half or whatever it was straight. And and the point I'm saying is those are in the cycle. I didn't know the event, and next thing you know, it blew vertical after the FOMC announcement. And then I'm like, hey, why did this happen just now? Because the pattern was fulfilled. And those who get my cycle work, whether it's on gold and silver, whether it's on cryptocurrencies, I'm telling people, I get so many blessed comments from people. They're just saying, like, how do you do this? And my answer is always very simple. It's not me. God just kind of shows me what patterns to look at, what charts to pull. And incredibly, there's this saying in the Bible, it says that which has been will be again. There is nothing new under the sun. And so I've given you some of my cycle and pattern work. And I think when you start to look at it, you start saying, like, wow, how does this happen? Continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I've seen there are a lot of things that in my life that I wonder, is this coincidental? And in looking at a lot of your patterns and how they relate to biblical prophecy, I guess you could say, or biblical patterns, it was very eye-opening to me. I mean, it's something that kind of backfilled a lot of my questions that I have in general about things. And I think it's naive to think that there isn't a force much bigger than us in all encompassing all facets of life, and whether it be patterns that we find in nature that repeat themselves over and over and over again, or patterns in behavior, or patterns in market action, which in many respects are part of emotion and human nature. And a lot of the things that we see over and over and over again, it starts to really resonate and make sense, especially when I'm looking at the charts with what has already been and what I expect to happen. It's almost eerie how you nailed some of these things almost down to the day. So I think whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's great. And I'm all of a sudden a big fan of your work, and I think everyone needs to take a look at this, because if what you're saying and what these charts are showing happens, there's a lot to be talking about over the next several weeks. In fact, over the next few days.
Exactly. Before what I ever did, and how I got into this, there's one of probably the top cycle analysts that ever lived was W.D. Gann. think it's over 100 years ago he did, but he predicted some of the most insane price movements and patterns, and he had boxes and boxes and boxes of research, and his ability to foretell what will happen was beyond measure. It was crazy. And so you just witnessed, what cycles can do, how you can predict them. And like you just said, you're right. The cycles that I just sent you, that my subscribers look at, literally are saying, okay. And you said the next few days, let's put it out there. The point I'm trying, what are the cycles saying? It's saying that before Christmas, which is, because Christmas is Monday the 25th. So before the end of this week, or I'm sorry, into the end of this week, gold and silver are going to explode. Okay. And we saw gold and silver, specifically gold, making new all-time high on December 1. It blew through 2100. It gapped up $75 on Sunday's open. They hammered it down $120 or $40 into Monday's close. I think it was like December 3rd or something like that, or 3rd or 4th, whatever it was. And since then, we have this battle going on because they've got a roof, and I'm sure you'll confirm this, at about 2,100 on gold. They cannot let gold breach 2,100. Okay, for this, that same roof is around, my calculation, about 25, maximum $27 on silver. They cannot let silver breach 25 to $27, and they will hammer it down every single time. And the chart was saying very clearly that gold will be, by this Friday, closing above new all-time highs. So the chart is saying, I'm not going to put a price out there because it's kind of irrelevant. Because to me, the more important thing as you're seeing the patterns is the cycle. How many days this way? How many days up? How many days down? Because that's really what we're watching right now. So from all of that information, what are you gathering on your intel that's out there that could cause gold to blow vertical into Christmas, into year end, or in January? What are all the pieces you're putting together from a financial perspective?
Well, one of the things that I think is fair to say is that this wild volatility that we're seeing, largely in silver, but also in gold, is a sign that the market is trying to break free from the shackles of its suppression. We've seen a shift. Now you see the commercial banks, which are typically the ones that are on the right side of the trade, move to the long side, as the managed money were the ones that were selling, driving the price down. I think this is a situation where all the stars are lining up perfectly, as far as I'm concerned. And when you look at the amount of central bank buying that we've seen this year, which is exceeding just about any time in history, you look at the central banks, they bought more gold over the last 2 years than any time in history, and that is continuing. Same thing with silver. We just got numbers that, as an example, that India bought 60 million ounces of silver in October and another 20 million ounces in November, on top of 304 million ounces in 2022. And these stars are all lining up perfectly. You see massive central bank buying at the same time that they're selling and not rolling over their treasuries. There is a shift being made by the most powerful people in the world, coinciding with these events. And, I have felt for a very long time that it's been the suppression of the Western market that has enabled the large central banks to reposition using the leverage, the suppressed leverage of the West against us. In other words, they're using the manipulated price to accumulate massive amounts of gold and silver. And we're seeing that. And I think you could argue.
Can I pause you for a minute? Explain to the viewers what derivative contracts are so they can understand what manipulation is, so they can understand what they're doing.
Sure. So the COMEX exchange was designed originally to offset risk. That was the reason it was designed. For example, a farmer who plants a field of wheat in the spring and wants to harvest, of course, in the fall, but in the interim, you have all sorts of variables. It could be a bumper crop, could be a rough year. You could have pests that eat at your crop, or it could rain all the time, or maybe not enough. And so the futures market said, listen, we'll pair up the farmer and the baker as an example. The baker needs the wheat to make his bread, and the farmer needs to sell his wheat in order to pay for his life. So, in other words, the farmer plants the crop and then sells his production forward into the marketplace, where the baker says, I'll buy that wheat from you in 6 months, and here's what I'm willing to pay. And here's what I'm willing to sell it at. And it offsets risks. So now the farmer doesn't have to worry about selling his crop at the end of the year. He has a price he's happy for, and the baker knows he doesn't have to worry about getting wheat at the end of the in the fall, because he's happy he bought it at a price. Well, that was what it was designed for, and the way that we use it as a metals company. If I have 5,000 ounces of gold in my warehouse, I will sell 5,000 ounces on COMEX. I'll sell it short. Now, it's a covered short because I have the metal behind it. It's not a naked short where I'm a commercial bank with gazillions of dollars and just sell to create a perception of reality. We'll get to that. But what it basically is this. So I have 5,000 ounces in my warehouse. I sell 5,000 ounces on paper. If the price goes down by $100 an ounce, I'm down $500,000 in my inventory. 5,000 ounces at $100 a piece. That's $500,000 I'm out in my physical holdings. But what I sold short on COMEX goes up commensurately. I'm market neutral. They offset one another. It is a way for me to offset my risk and not to speculate. Now, I asked my head trader, I don't know, might have been 6 weeks ago now already, but you'll get the point. I said to him, Ryan, what does it cost for us to control one COMEX gold contract? One COMEX gold contract is 100 ounces of gold, paper form of gold. So you're talking $200,000 plus. And he said, well, the trade costs us just a few bucks, but we have to have roughly $7,000 in our margin account. That's it. So if the price never goes against you, you don't get a margin call. So I have $7,000 in my margin account. I can control $200,000 worth of gold. Well, what if I'm a commercial bank or a central bank with 500 million in my margin account? I have $500 million in my margin account. I now control $15 billion worth of notional gold and silver contracts. I can
I just
control.
want to pause you. People need to understand very clearly. So with $7,000, you can control $200,000. And now imagine a banking institution that has unlimited funds. Imagine what they can do with that equation. Continue.
And they don't need to have the gold backing it in order, because they have the deepest pockets. And they also know where all the pain points are. They're the ones that sell the options largely. So they know where everyone is positioned. They know where they're going to get people to capitulate. So what they can do is they can paint the tape, as it's called. They can control the narrative by buying up through resistance levels, triggering buy orders, or selling down through resistance levels, triggering sell orders, which begets more selling or begets more buying. And so it's a corrupt system. It is one that is over leveraged in this case by about 35 times and rehypothecated, which means everyone who has a contract, it represents 100 ounces of gold, or in silver, 5,000 ounces of silver. Now, I haven't looked at the gold lately, but just the other day I was looking at the silver positioning. And in the registered category on COMEX, that's the category where the bars that are supposedly backing the contracts are available for delivery. It was rehypothecated 1,490%. In other words, 1,500%. In other words, there's 15 times more contracts than there are bars backing them. This is rehypothecation.
Wouldn't that be like taking, if you owned a home, you sold it to 15 people, so all 15 people think they own that home, but there's only one home?
Right. And they're very wealthy. They're never in the neighborhood and they just own it. But if they ever want to come take it, only one key unlocks the door, and the other 14, well, here's some cash. We'll settle with you that way. And that's pretty much what it is. So it is a system that is levered. It is a system that is not really indicative of the demand globally for gold and silver. And it is enabled largely because of something called Gibson's paradox, which is the inverse relationship between real interest rates and gold. And for the last 15, 20 years, it has been about suppression of interest rates, which created this illusion of prosperity and all of these distortions that are now, in a biblical fashion, starting to unwind and find truth and reality. And so They suppressed the price of gold because they were suppressing interest rates. And the suppression of interest rates created an illusion of prosperity where people felt wealthy. Their houses were going up, their 401ks were going up. It created the wealth effect, an illusionary wealth
Yes,
effect.
that is critical choice of words and a beautiful choice of words. Illusion.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. And so they had to suppress the canary in the gold mine, which is the price of gold and silver, because it is the barometer by which we measure the health of a currency. In other words, if you have very high interest rates, then the theory would be that you wouldn't want to really buy gold because it doesn't pay any interest. You would just buy US Treasuries. If you have zero on the federal funds rate for the better part of 15 years, well, then there's no opportunity cost in buying gold, which doesn't pay interest. And that's really the theory behind it. So then gold would go higher. So by maintaining this artificial price of interest rates, they stepped on gold and they stepped on silver. It created all sorts of distortions. And so when you talk about the COMEX, the price setting mechanism of the West has created distortions in commodity prices, and in particular in gold and silver, which the West had vested interests, whatever they may be, in keeping low. And so I think what you are basically witnessing is a unraveling of this, because what they didn't count on was, and maybe again, this falls in line with what has been written, right? And the fact that there are no coincidences and cycles have a way of playing out. What we are witnessing is, I don't know if they ever counted on the fact that you have sovereign nations who many years ago didn't have the ability to do these things, whether it be financially or even in terms of their wherewithal politically, and how it all intertwines globally in terms of safety and numbers and size of military and all of these things. They're standing for delivery. And you're seeing huge deliveries leaving these ecosystems and leaving the system altogether. And so now you have a system that is very over leveraged and very rehypothecated. And when it breaks, it will be something to behold. Because
it'll be something biblical to watch, right?
Well, it is. And as we were talking off air, if you got an event where all of a sudden the price started to spike, like your charts say they will.
So if you could expand on what a short squeeze is, make it short squeeze, so how people can understand, because it's like the example that people have used is a balloon underwater, right? But this is much more than a balloon underwater. This is a one of those balloons that carries people up in the air. There's so much manipulation and price suppression to hold this massive object underwater. So expand upon a short squeeze, naked shorts, so people can understand the magnitude of what's going on here.
Yeah, so you have these commercial banks with literally millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of short positions in gold and silver, meaning they're selling, driving the price down. When you short something, you do it with the anticipation and the duty to pay it back, but you are anticipating paying it back at a lower price. So these big banks can short the price and they'll drive the price down, and then they can cover those shorts at a later date at a lower price. That's the anticipation when you sell short. When you go long, you anticipate the price going much higher. So in other words, you have all of these banks that are naked shorting. They're selling short into the market metal that they do not have, and they anticipate really never having to deliver it, but to cash settle. Well, if all of a sudden the price starts to go much, much higher, you have to get this metal somehow in order to put it back into the system or cash settle it. But the point is that as the price goes higher and higher and higher and higher, it forces people into the market. Now, if you say, I want to stand for delivery, where are you going to get that metal when no one wants to sell it as the price is spiking? And you have to go outside the system to find it, or wherever you're going to find it, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. It can bankrupt you like that. And that's actually what bankrupted Bear Stearns in 2008. And that was admitted by the former CFTC commissioner, Bart Chilton, who admitted it on a podcast with Chris Marcus and then died a few days later. Coincidence? Not sure, but it was the only time he ever admitted the whole story about JP Morgan and their role in taking over Bear Stearns' short position. But the point is they were massively short on silver, and it went from $12 to $21. It put them out of business. They couldn't cover it, and bang, they went out of business because of that leverage. So When the price starts to move against you very, very quickly, you have to, if you have to come up with that product or cover it with cash if you're lucky enough, but it can move up so fast that it can, in very, very short period of time, as everyone's covering, which means buying it, really, in essence, is what it means. You're buying the metal back to make your position whole. That act of buying and buying and buying and buying and buying on top of other people who are buying, it'll jack the price up so fast that those short positions get squeezed and very quickly can run out of money and out of business.
So let me give you something here. So what you're describing, and in the Bible, in scriptures, there's a phrase called, when I was sleeping one day, I get like words, and the word I kept hearing, when I know when I'm hearing something, it's very clear. I hear the word over and over and over again. And so what I was hearing was the word cankered, 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 cankered. I'm like, oh, I know that. That's John 5. I want to read this to you because I think you're going to really appreciate, because this is really describing what you literally just talked about. So what does John 5 say? Okay. It says, go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for the miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupt. Your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver, meaning the paper contracts that you were just talking about, their gold and their silver is cankered. And the rust of them shall be witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as if it were fire. What does that mean? That's called a short squeeze. Ye have heaped treasures for the last days. So what is this talking about? This is talking specifically about gold and silver paper derivative contracts. It's right there.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and it makes great sense because they have distorted and affected so many lives. I mean, the go all the way back to the poor laborers mining gold in South Africa or wherever it may be, or the effect of distorting the free markets in this way, in a very nefarious way, in an ungenuine way, I think has had big ramifications. And when it unwinds, yeah, and that's that's fair, I guess.
As a word, unwinds, right? So think about this, for example, and I'm sure you can, well, actually we talked about this earlier. So when they have these positions, they have these called these naked short positions because they know they're never going to get hit. They run the game, right? But let's say, there's this prophetic word, Kim Clement. I don't know if you know the prophet, but his words were this: the brothers of Goliath, which are the BRICS nations, stand in glee. We're all proud and happy. We will cripple you. And the you is the United States. We will destroy your credit.
I am restoring the fortunes of Zion. I am restoring the fortunes that were the inheritance of my people. I am restoring the fortunes of those that are elect of God and had been stolen from. You shall eat your delicacies again, and your children will no longer be your food. You shall not use them and take them out of the womb anymore, says the Lord. Watch how I change everything. And then I heard gold. He said to me, he will restore the fortunes in this nation. For they are saying, how do we kill the giant? How do we kill the giant of debt? How do we kill the giant of socialism? How do we kill the giant of human secularism? The giant of debt, the giants that have come, the brothers of Goliath, stand in glee watching America. We will cripple you. You will lose your credit. But God said, watch. I said 20,000. And he will take a simple stone and he will hold it up and they will laugh at him. But the plan is so brilliant, says the Lord. It could only have been given by me.
You see, for a fact, because you've been screaming at the top of your lungs about the BRICS as much as I have since they actually signed with Russia and 9 days after the fall of Kabul in 2011. So we're literally watching, biblical events manifest right before us. And this is, and I truly love the one thing you were talking about, Statue of Liberty, and you talk about the scales of justice and finance, right? And that's really something really important to understand, because from a biblical perspective, the last time we saw scales that really manifest was, we all that saying, the writing on the wall. We all know that saying, the writing on the wall. Well, the writing on the walls really came from when the Babylon fell, because the writing came in the wall as many, many tekel upsharsim, but the translation by Daniel, the prophet, was, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting, meaning it completely out of balance, quadrillions of dollars to control. So you've been weighed in the balance, you've been found wanting, and then your kingdom has come to an end. What does that mean? It means that when the truth comes out about what they've been doing with the financial system, you've been caught smoke and mirrors, right? It's an illusion. When the truth comes out that this is only an illusion, you're gonna see what's called a short squeeze. Well, what's a short squeeze? Well, you were just referencing it, but it's not a matter of silver going, or say example, gold. It's not a matter of gold doing $100 move. Like we saw a $75 gap up on gold on December 1, or on that Sunday. It literally, it opened, gapped up $75, and then what did they do? They created paper contracts out of, just they went gangbuster crazy to slam it back down $140 into Monday's close. Why? They got to keep it under the roof, because you got to keep, the mystery Babylon. They got to keep, everything thus and so, they got to keep the smoke and mirrors, perfect. They got to keep it all under control. And so again, the charts are indicating something's about to go down. Also, we've talked about, we're at a very, last time we talked about how, from a biblical perspective, Corona came on the scene on the last day of Hanukkah. And then stepped us into 4 years of, evil would be probably the best description of what just went down in the world. Thus, you moving to Florida and the whole thing, right? And then all what happened with the rioting in Minneapolis, where I used to live, right? So all of these things happened upon the world. Now, the opposite to that would have been Rosh Hashanah, which would have been Hanukkah that just finished last Friday, on the 15th. So that would have been the matching date. But again, I didn't see anything that it was like a wow factor happen on that last day. But again, we're talking about God will do things in his times and in his seasons. And so we've got a seasonal moment in time right here.
But see, I did see something. Bo.
Okay, so there's 2 points. So we've got the 15th of December, which was the last day of Hanukkah. And then secondly, we literally right into a seasonal transition point, because God will do things on his seasons as well. And that's this Thursday, the 21st of December. So tell us a little bit what your thoughts were about last week. Did you see anything?
Well, I saw something that I think could be a very important pivot point. And I say it because after our conversation, well, I've been looking at things through a different lens. And I mean, you really, in many ways, opened my eyes to something that's right in front of me that I never saw. And so I've been looking at certain things a different way. Now, I don't remember when we talked last week, we talk about the United Arab Emirates at all?
No, we did not. No.
Okay, so good. So, a lot of what I've talked about and what we talked about are all of the things that Saudi Arabia has been doing. And we talked about the Afghanistan pullout and the contract that was signed between Saudi Arabia and Russia for joint military protection. We talked about the BRICS, how Saudi Arabia has joined the BRICS, how they've joined the Belt Road Initiative along with every other OPEC country. We talked about how Saudi Arabia joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the largest regional military organization on the planet. We talked about how they joined the BRICS New Development Bank. We talked about how they told folks in Davos, hey, we would listen to taking other currencies for oil. Now, that was all very provocative, but not as provocative as what I saw over the last 10 days or so. And culminating with what I saw happen at the end of the week last week, which I'll tell you, and maybe there is more significance in it, maybe not.
So what happens many times too is hindsight's 2020. So like events will go down. For example, when Saudi signed the BRICS with Russia, the contract with Russia, I didn't know that for like a few days afterwards. And so news comes out afterwards about maybe events that we on certain dates that we had as critical dates. So we're still waiting to see what pans out. But I am interested in seeing what you got to say.
Oh, the world's a big place, man, and that's part of it too. So, anyways, so United Arab Emirates has a conference 10 days ago or so in Dubai for the United Nations climate change conference in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and it was preceded over by the chairman of the state-owned United Arab Emirates oil company, and he was the guy that was presiding over this conference. And there were 200 delegates invited from around the world, representing 200 countries, that came to Dubai for this conference. The day or 2 days before the conference, right after we spoke, United Arab Emirates publicly said, we will not take dollars for oil going forward, and we want all of the BRICS countries to start using our local currencies for oil sales. They're in essence saying,
I'm sure that was on the 5th. That was actually announced on the 15th of December.
It was announced a couple days before. I don't know the exact day, but it would have been right around the beginning
during Hanukkah. At least during Hanukkah, probably.
Yes. And so that's a huge shot across the bow. Listen, they are the 7th largest producer of oil in the world. They are an OPEC producer. And they just were admitted into BRICS alongside of Saudi Arabia. Now, it gets a little bit more provocative than that. Putin hasn't left Russia but maybe twice in the last couple of years because of this Western bounty on his head, so to speak. And after the meeting ends, after all these 200 countries leave, after a day or two before they were told we're not going to take dollars for oil anymore, and the head of this state-owned oil company tells the former president of Ireland, listen, just so you know, if we go green and stop fossil fuel production, we're going to send everyone back to the caves. You can tell where their head is in this. Everyone leaves, and lo and behold, last week, unannounced impromptu meeting where Putin flies to the United Arab Emirates flanked by 4 Russian MiGs to protect him, an unannounced meeting into the United Arab Emirates, and then flies from there to Saudi Arabia, where their 1.1 million barrel oil reduction, now they upped it to 2.1 million barrels per day in the face of a falling oil price. And so is it coincidence? Is all of this coincidence where,
and I saw that video, he's actually high-fiving or low-fiving the leaders of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and they did all sorts of a big celebration for him with the fighter jets and all sorts of stuff. So, there was no fear. Right. And in my mind, this is a huge deal. Now, maybe it's setting off this chain of events, but it is a huge deal to me when, you saw what happened to Gaddafi and Hussein when they threatened to not take dollars for oil. Well, this is a different thing. And is it a coincidence that Putin flew there and said, hey, what did he say to him? We got your back.
And that's a great point to bring up because, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, you have to understand, right? These were small nations, right? And so the moment you go against King Dollar, look what happens to you, right? But this is a whole different ballgame. This is really important because the BRICS is not just like a little nation. We're talking hundreds of nations have come together, and the BRICS represents, some of the biggest Goliaths, right? So this is, and China, Russia, we're talking big deal going on here, and so there's no way that you can't go invade the world now. This is biblical what's coming down here, because what we're watching is an attack on the world reserve currency. And why is that so important? Because for a fact, they take big planes, they stack them with pallets of money, they've taken them around the world, they buy off anybody or any country they need to buy off. They've used this money system to enslave humanity with credit cards, mortgages, student loans. This money system went from the millions in time of Nixon into the quadrillions, which is 1,000 trillion is a quadrillion. So this money is basically been, the Bible's clear, their love of money is the root of all evil. And so the money is how they built their empire. In that case, this empire is Babylon. It's how they did it. And so unless the US dollar falls and loses its status as the world reserve currency, nothing changes. Nothing changes. And so because they will continue to use this money system to control everything. But now we've got a huge problem. And you just brought it up. What, the United Emirates, what the Saudis, what Russia, all these nations are coming together, the BRICS, all these nations are coming up against the world reserve currency.
Yeah, and 20 countries have formally applied to the BRICS. Another 20 have informally applied. Every single one of the 20 that have applied are very resource rich, including Venezuela, who has the largest known physical deposits of oil in the world. And, you know, in and of themselves, not so much. Add them little by little by little, and more and more and more, you get mass adoption in cryptocurrency speak. You get a large enough mass of humanity, of GDP, and of military might, where it's not something like you said, you can't go and attack the world. And all of these countries are joining with their neighbors. They have regional influence. And so you're finding safety in numbers where countries can do these things now that never would have had the nerve to stand up to against the West. And, you know, so it's a big, big, big deal, in my opinion. And I've always said that the moment where it gets very real is when Saudi Arabia and all of OPEC says, listen, you guys sign an executive order to go green. We appreciate that. Thanks for the memories. We're no longer taking dollars for oil. And bang, that's when the dollar has that collapse moment. Now, it's a good segue. I'm going to give you props. In what you sent me, your chart shows a dollar topping almost to the day when the Fed made this announcement that they've defeated inflation, which is a bunch of baloney. What they really say is we've given up on fighting inflation. We've chosen inflation over austerity, the way all governments have. Your chart shows a drop. Well, the dollar fell from 103 to just under 101. That's a big drop. And, you know, it's following perfectly. So again, I don't care what the events are. I can just simply say that right now, your charts are spot on in both gold and the dollar. And so I guess it remains to be seen what happens here into the end of the year. But the table is set. You can see this formation of countries that is pushing back against the hegemony of the West, and doing so in a successful manner and an accelerating manner. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting time moving forward.
Right. When you look at this is a chart from maybe like a couple of weeks ago. It's one of my old updates. But you know, the news when I just posted, and then you're looking, you know, you saw it earlier today. But just when you're looking at this chart here, you got to admit, like, this is beyond possible, because the top chart here, that's called a historic cycle, this is 2 years ongoing. You can look from point A, B, C, D, and E, every single part. So for the US dollar here is right in the middle, and then gold's below it. They're opposite cycles, but the cycle here at the very top, the historic versus the US dollar cycle, you got to go like, how is this happening? But yet it's near its perfection, because as October hit at point E, that was it. Look what the dollar's been doing ever since October, right? But more importantly, the October time point was predicted way back here in January of 2021. So the point I'm trying to make is, I don't watch the news so much, because my specialty is to study the patterns and count time. I study time, and then I analyze patterns. I overlay them on that. And so all I know is, regardless of all the cumulative events of the world, will in essence and in the end fulfill the cycle, fulfill that exact pattern. And so that dollar pattern that I show you, and I've done this podcast with you and other people, all I'm saying is, you think it's bad now? Oh, you ain't seen anything yet, because you've seen the further progression of that. And the first quarter of next year is horrific for the US dollar. And if we're expecting, the cycle itself is potentially indicating that as we head into Christmas, like the end of this week, the last trading day of the week, we're supposed to be at new all-time highs on gold. So if that's the case, what the heck's coming next year? You get what I'm saying? And so that means that the roof broke on gold. It means the 2100 broke on gold. So the big question is, what the heck just happened? And more importantly, that's what we talked about, the short squeeze, right? Could be pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Well, I think it very well will be. If you see the price of metal move to that degree, yes, the amount of short contracts that are out there will be enough to put companies out of business. I mean, it's that substantial. Now, you know, who knows if that happens in terms of this massive squeeze on COMEX or not, but I will tell you that the table is set for that to happen, and the fuel
Yes,
to the
exactly.
fire
The
that
point,
would
yes.
push to the upside
And
is
that's a great.
crazy.
I just want to just for a second. That's the point I'm trying to make is the table is set for this to happen. The cycle for the U.S. dollar is down for let's just say a long time. Okay, not for another week. No, we're talking months. Okay, so if the dollar is heading down for months and months, explain the correlation between gold, silver, and the dollar.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly, they're inversely correlated, and they're also inversely correlated to the U.S. stock market. One of the few assets that is inversely correlated to it, and a lot of that has to do with interest rate suppression. But I would argue that maybe the dollar is down for a lot longer than that. We just got news, and this comes directly from the Congressional Budget Office, a branch of the United States government, and they said that by 2031, 7 years away, that 100% of the revenue they take in from income tax will go just to pay the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlements like Social Security, which is already 70 trillion in the hole. And a trillion seconds ago, as we said last time, is 31,688 years ago. So think about this for a moment when you talk about dollar strength and how much of a crossroads we are really at, or a Rubicon, right? How is it even possible that the United States could intend to be the dominant economic and military superpower if in 7 years, by their own admission, and they're usually way off, it's probably more like 3 or 4 years, that everything, all the discretionary items of the budget, including the military, would have to be borrowed. So, how is it that we're going to have the strongest military in the world when we're reliant on the rest of the world to lend us money to build that military, to go and be coercive and to maintain this hegemony that everyone's pushing back against? And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is there's not a snowball's chance in Haiti. I just can't see it happening. So I think your charts are if anything, this could be much more severe to the upside in metals, to the downside in the dollar, and to the markets. And what makes it that much worse, there are two things that make it that much worse. One, there's massive rallying of countries that are amounting to the majority of human population rallying against us. This is the rallying cry. But there's another thing too, and thank God for people like you who are out there, signaling the alarm. But I think that things are changing so rapidly in this country, around the world, that people in this country are not prepared for what's coming because the media does not give us any flavor of what's happening outside this country. And everyone sees what's happening inside the country with the lack of unity and the divisiveness and the lawlessness and all of this stuff, but they don't see what's happening. And I think everyone out there who are coalescing, they see what's happening here too. And they see the America that they used to know that maybe isn't the same one, the Lady Liberty with blindfolds and the scales of justice and all of these things that have been distorted. And I think they have no idea what's coming at them, because if indeed we do see the loss of the petrodollar standard, life in this country will, in a matter of hours, change to levels that people are not prepared for and have no idea the severity of an unwinding of all of this leverage, what it basically means. And whether it be commercial real estate, whether it be banking, whether it be, indebtedness. I mean, and it's a very bad position when you realize that this country, the majority of it's paycheck to paycheck with virtually no savings and no unity and respect for authority. It is a bad place to be if this stuff happens. And that's why I think these cycles, which are eerily accurate, should really, really be watched very, very closely, because if any of these events happen, I think these will not only prove to be right, but perhaps even understate exactly what I think is coming.
One thing I want to talk to you about, which is kind of interesting, let me pull the slide up here. You brought up the United Emirates, right? You realize that it was in 1913 was the origins of the Arab-Israel conflict in 1913.
I did not know that.
Well, the point I'm trying to make here is in that same, because we're dealing with everything we're discussing with Israel, right, and United Emirates, Russia, and so the whole conflict that we're dealing with right now, this conflict started in 1913. What else was in 1913?
Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve Act. When? December 20 23rd, 2 days after the winter solstice, which is hitting this Thursday. The 23rd is Saturday. Now, you've talked about the dollar, and this is my take on it. The dollar is going to have, so it's called, it's going to be worth less. That's the first devaluation that's coming here in anytime now into the first quarter of 2024. That'll be a sudden 30% haircut on the dollar, taking it down to the 70s on the index, which is horrific because we're talking leverage upon leverage upon leverage upon leverage with these derivative contracts. This is just not a 30% haircut. This is 30% on quadrillions of dollars. So this is going to be the collapse or the fall of the US dollar as a world reserve currency. That's the first haircut. Then the second haircut is another, so it's equal worth less, and then worthless. Now, there is a prophecy by the prophet Chris Reed, and he actually had what happened is he had a prophetic vision of a $50 bill. Now, the reason it was a $50 bill is why? It's a 50-year jubilee. That's when it starts. Okay, so the prophetic word on the 50 years. So no one knew that actually. That was the one that basically said the reason it was a $50 bill because of the 50-year jubilee. Those that don't know, but Leviticus says, "Thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all of its inhabitants," and that's on the 50th year. So we know that the Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71, but it wasn't until 73 petrodollar contract, right? We know that the Roe v. Wade became law in the year 73, 50 years is now. So all of this is screaming. So from Roe v. Wade to the petrodollar contract, even to Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum, they're the ones we know that are basically working with the Federal Reserve. They're all in bed together. So they went in, there was 71 was when they were founded, but it was in 73 they published the Davos Manifesto. So all of this is screaming 73. 73 plus 50 is 2023, which is now. We've only got 2 weeks left in 2023. So this is the interesting part. So the Federal Reserve now, we're talking, it's exactly this Saturday, the Federal Reserve is 110 years old. First haircut's expected on the US dollar, and which is imminent. That will lead to another haircut on the dollar sometime in the future, which is going to cause gold to even do another bigger moonshot in the future. And then that leads us into the year, basically we're looking at about 2030, because that'll be 120 years for the US dollar. And that's when you read Genesis 6:3 that says, "And then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, and his days shall be 120. So the US dollar has got a cycle of 10 more years left in it, but this is the haircut. This is the fall of Babylon, which means it will lose the status of the world reserve currency. So everything after this, everybody knows the game is up. The game is exposed. People will still transact. It's like within the nation, some people will still be using the US dollar, but nations as a whole, other countries will not want to accept it as payment. Why? Because they know the game's up. They know Caesar's got no clothes. Yeah, so that's my take on the dollar.
I believe it. And it's interesting, too. The head of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia earlier this year, 2023, said that China is not only our largest trading partner in oil, our most important trading partner now, but for the next 50 years. And it's interesting. He used the term the next 50 years almost as if he was closing the door preemptively on the dollar as being the petrodollar now after 50 years. And all of these things are lining up together. And when you see the seventh largest oil producing country in the world, who was just admitted to BRICS alongside Saudi Arabia, make this announcement, and then have Putin fly in flanked by 4 jets. I mean, this is a coincidence, or is it real? And then goes into a massive, celebratory welcome committee celebration in Saudi Arabia. Is it coincidence or is it not? And I would argue no. I mean, this is actually kind of freaky how it all plays out this way.
Have a look at this. This is another, use the word freaky. This is a beautiful explanation of the word freaky. You got 4 horsemen in Revelation. Look at their colors, right? You got white, red, black, and green, and then compare them with all the flags of the Middle East. What a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? You see how all of this is coming together beautifully? Everything's lining up for a massive shift in the world, but it's all predicated on one specific event right now. The next critical event is very specifically this. It's the third seal. It's the scales in the hand. It's, like you referenced earlier, the scales in the hand. It's financial rebalancing. Something huge is about to happen in the financial system because it's all based on how they built it. It's very pleasing and enjoyable speaking with somebody who really understands and can explain to the viewers the magnitude of the fraud. Because what else can you call it?
Well, and what it really is to me, Bo, honestly, I'm a guy who I'm spiritual. I've never been religious ever, and for whatever reason.
And I want to pause you for a minute just to let you know, all religions of the world, every one is man-made to control man within the same, by what? The dollar. You see, all of it's a control mechanism. It's all about control. So I just wanted to add that in so people, when they say the word religion, just know that is divide and conquer. If you can have the whites fighting the blacks, if you can have this religion fighting that religion, evil wants to segregate as many things and people, because there's billions of us. They want to separate as many people as possible, because the more that we fight against one another, right, the less unity that we have, and then there's no strength. And because
I believe in that fully. And that's part of my thinking. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've pushed back against it. Yet I don't want to sound conceited, but I'm deep enough in terms of my intellect and my thought to understand that there's so much in front of us that can't be coincidental, and so many gifts that we've been given on this earth to get to where we are as a society, to be able to get to the moon, to be able to do these things. That's not a coincidence. We're not living in caves and using stones and trying to keep a fire going any longer. So I understand the bigger picture, and I also am very, very spiritual, and I believe in a higher power. I believe in all of these things, but when you put this together with what I have been looking at from a completely different angle, and then put it together against these cycles, these biblical cycles, and see the accuracy of them, regardless of what the catalyst was, if it's written in the sand, so to speak, then we don't know what the catalysts are. We just see what happens as a result of those catalysts. We're revisionist history, so to speak, but you can see it unfolding. And I guess all I'm trying to say is, and I mean this sincerely, it's been a bit of a revelation to see this and to look at it from a bigger context. And it actually gives me greater conviction that what I am seeing is true, because it's all lining up. And the things that I've been talking about from my own perspective have lined up. When I put this layered over it, it becomes, whoa, now it's a whole different level of almost spooky. Like it's spooky. But yet you can see the accuracy of it. And when you look at previous events, as you've so eloquently laid out, in 73 and in 1913 and all of the significance of that, it's pretty cool. Like I said to you last time we talked, I'd like to sit down with a bottle of wine and in front of a fireplace and pick your ear for an evening, because I think it would be a great evening. But I think it's added a lot of color to the things that I talk about and the things that I think about. So I thank you for that.
All I can say is, in closing, there's nothing random in our world. I think you're starting to see that as well too. Everything's by design. From a biblical perspective, the greatest prophecy ever written is 2,500 years old, the Daniel 2 prophecy. And every kingdom that ever was talked about, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the papacy, like, think about that. Everything existed, but this was spoken about 2,500 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
But the only piece missing to that, it says, while you were watching, a stone carved out by no human hand comes and destroys Babylon, which means that this is the hand of God's going to be intertwined in this whole thing to take down the Babylonian money magic system, because that's what it is. It's a money magic system of what they've created, and so that's what's going on. It's all about the king dollar and how they built it all, and so something's big's about to manifest. I think our meeting was a divine appointment. I think God wanted, God uses everybody. It uses all of us. It says to me, I use you to show my people.
Yeah,
So
why
what do I
not?
do? Why, I showed you. And when I showed you, your eyes went, and it wasn't me forcing it. I just literally showed you, look, what do you think? Right. The point I'm trying to make is there's nothing random in the world. We're all in this together, because bottom line is, there's two things in this world. There's evil, Satan, and there's, like you call it, a higher power. That's true. It's God. Okay. There's a creator. And all the evil is a creation, period. So all the evil is in the earth is because it's a creation, but there's a creator. And that's the higher power that you reference. Bottom line is nothing's random, and exciting times are coming. Horrific times are coming, but it's a double-edged sword. It's the best of times in the worst of times, because you are prepared. You knew and know what's coming. You've been in the business of gold for 30 plus years, if I'm not mistaken. So why? So because you know that this whole system is smoke and mirrors, and now it couldn't be more obvious. I myself stand in the same boat that you are. Okay. We're in the same belief system. And so all I know is that, it's a double-edged sword. When there's a biblical intervention, it's going to be biblical. You're going to see multiplication of what you sell, gold and silver. At the same time, it's going to be horrific for them for what they've done, because this is cool. They've used this money magic system to hide all of their secrets, their dirty secrets, because it's bribes and payoffs. When the dollar loses status as the world reserve currency, nations will not accept it as payment. And guess what comes out? All the little, but they're not even little, they're huge, dirty
Dirty laundry.
secrets. Dirty
Yep.
laundry. Yep. It's all coming out. So, Andrew, how can people find you?
Thank you for having me, and I hope to come back again. I know
Oh,
there's going to
yeah.
be so much to talk about, Bo, and like I said, I gotten more out of these two interviews than most I've done over the past couple of years, and I don't. That's no disrespect to anyone else. You've taught me more than I've taught you, and I thank you for that. You can go to our website at milesfranklin.com, or a better way would be to send an email at info@milesfranklin.com. And like I said, I look very forward to watching this closely through a new lens, if you will. And I look very forward
It's
to
called
picking
a
up where you
divine
and I left
lens.
off. Yeah. Well, and I thank you for that, for opening my eyes, and I look forward to picking up where we left off. Believe me, I'll be nudging on your shirt collar to try and get you to have me back on again to see what the world has shown us between now and the next time we chat.
God bless you. Thanks for
You
all you
too, my
do.
man.
And I just, I really am blessed to have you here as well, too. So thank you so much. Be well. God bless.